Hi guys, it's Tony Robbins. You're listening to Habits and Hustle. Crush it.
Hi, hello, David Sinclair. How are you? Nice to have you as a guest.
Oh, nice to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, I was saying, I'm super excited to be talking to you. I've heard about you for a very long time. You've done a lot of my friends' podcasts. A lot of my friends have been, yapping about you because you are kind of like the father or pioneer of like longevity and anti-aging. And you don't really say anti-aging, right? It's more like reverse aging, right? Why is it not, how is it different? Because you still age, but you're aging in reverse. What's the distinction?
Well, anti-aging has a bad rap because there are a lot of people out there who claim to be anti-aging and don't know what they're talking about. And so we prefer to call it longevity research or working towards increasing the health span of people. But yeah, it's all a PR campaign because we've been trying to legitimize this field of science for many decades, but it's difficult when you get mixed up with the snake oil salespeople out there.
Yeah. So that's why. So basically, you're the father to longevity, age reversal. So why don't we start from the beginning? Why do we age? And how? I know it's like a big lofty question, and we're going to get really into the weeds. But overall, why do we age, and how? Let's start with that.
Well, nobody agrees on why we age, but we do agree that there are about 9 different things that go wrong in the body. We call these the hallmarks of aging. But recently, my lab has put out a new theory of aging called the information theory of aging. And what we're saying is that essentially what is going on in the body is that the youthful information that we had as children that allows our cells to read the right genes at the right time, like a pianist, or for those who are old enough, a DVD with music on it or a movie. The reader of that information gets disrupted. So when we're old, our bodies are not reading the right genes at the right time in the right place. And you get this terrible music, or in the case of the cells, terrible function. And we didn't realize actually until recently that the cells in our bodies have a backup copy of that information that we can access. And so we've been able to and this is one of the reasons why I think we're likely to be right about this theory. And that is that you can restore that information. If you think of it, our body's like a computer, and the gene control is the software. We found a way recently to flip the reset switch and reboot the software. So you can make an old computer that's running really slowly and terribly and keeps getting hung up into a beautiful new computer just by reinstalling software.
I heard you actually say a couple times, you use that kind of the same DVD example, or kind of like as we age, we get scratches on that DVD, right? And eventually we get too many scratches, and then the DVD or CD or whatever it is doesn't work anymore, right? Basically, is what happens.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. The scratches don't allow the reader to play the music, and it's skipping, and you get this terrible mess. And it's the same with our body. Our genes are in units, like different songs, and they get played differently, whether it's the brain that is a different playlist to the liver and to the skin.
Right.
But over time, those scratches, the equivalent in the body, which are basically messed up loops of DNA, means that the body is losing its identity, so that the brain doesn't remember that it's fully a brain anymore, or a liver or the skin. And that's what we see as aging.
And it's interesting because you say that 80% of aging is what we do with our lives while we're living it, and only 20% is genetics. Because I was always under the impression that genes play such a massive role in how we age and how our skin looks. Like, as you, for example, like when you first appeared, I'm like, wow, this guy looks like you can pass for a 16-year-old kid. And I would think initially, wow, he has great genes. He's got great skin, or whatever you are saying actually works because of how you look. So how does that, what is that? Is that just always been like a fallacy and a myth that your genes are predominantly how we age and what happens to us?
Yeah, it's completely a myth. Well, 80% of it is a myth. So when you study twins, you can see that the twin that leads this horrible sedentary lifestyle and smokes and doesn't exercise, eats the wrong things, can live 20 years less, fewer years than the twin that does the right things. And they've got the exact same genome, but it's this other control system, the epigenome, that reads the genes, that is alterable by how you live your life. So yeah, I find it extremely empowering that most of our future health and longevity is in our own hands, how we live our lives. It's better to start early, but it's also never too late to start living a healthy lifestyle to ensure the best chances that you'll still be playing tennis when you're 95 or 100.
And so, and I want to go into all that stuff, but what do you say about people who live a really bad lifestyle, right? Like they're eating terribly, they don't exercise, they are crack addicts for half their life. And then these guys are smoking their whole life and they're living to 102. And then people who do all the right things, who exercise, very frequently, eat very well, do all these proper things, and they drop dead of a heart attack on a tennis court, when they're 40. So why does that happen?
Well, yeah, living a healthy lifestyle doesn't guarantee that you'll live to 100, but it'll greatly increase your chances. And it's also true that if you smoke, it doesn't guarantee that you'll get lung cancer, but your chances go up more than fivefold. And we've all heard stories of people who are in each of those camps, but it doesn't make it a fact. It doesn't mean that that's how you're going to be. I certainly wouldn't subscribe to the idea that smoking is going to get you to 100 just because somebody else made it there. There are some people who have great sets of genes. One in a million people have these kind of genes that allows them to do whatever they want. But most of us are not that lucky. So we have some extra work to do.
So basically, most of us have pretty average genes, but the people who kind of live like that, who live to 100 when they do all the wrong things, their genes are just so dominantly good, in a way, I guess you would say, that would help 80% of their bad lifestyle. Exactly.
But there are a lot of people who live to over 100 who do lead the sort of life that I'm talking about. The longest lived man and woman in recorded history both said that they have a great sense of humor. They drink red wine almost every day, have olive oil. And these are not coincidences. We've now got the science that backs up that there are molecules in these kinds of foods that help you live a long time. And so, yeah, I think that the combination of good genes, 20%, 80% living a good lifestyle, gives you, just the chances of getting there. Just like, buying 1,000 lottery tickets doesn't mean that you're going to win, but it certainly increases your chances than if you don't buy any.
Right, absolutely. So can we go over some stuff where what we can do in terms of our lifestyle, besides like the obvious, the exercising, although, what I really like about you and what I see, you're not so extreme, you know what I mean? Like there are a lot of people and experts who come on or talk about never do this. You have to always do this. And you seem to have a lot of fluidity in in what you say, right? So well, let's talk about it. So you say like exercising pretty regularly is one, right? Eating your diet is one. And I love I love how you say it. You're like, kind of like be hungry a little bit. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to like constantly eat. I mean, can you kind of give us some more examples of ways we can kind of increase our chances of living longer?
Right. Well, just first on the eating thing, it seems to be more important when you eat than what you eat. And so I restrict my meals to just one time of day, which I prefer is I like a nice dinner. But the rest of the day, my body is generally not consuming anything. So there's 3 meals a day plus snacks by some nutritionists, I think is really misguided. I'm not talking about elderly people who need nutrition, but those of us who are around my age, I'm 51 now, I certainly don't need 3 meals a day. And my body's very happy existing on a small dinner. But you're right, I'm not extreme. I do want to address that. I was recently talking to a friend who said, you can't admit that you ate a cheesecake, or you can't admit that you ate a steak. But, I'm a scientist. I'm sworn to honesty. So it's true that sometimes I do give in. I'm generally lazy. I hate exercise. I love food. So I'm just the average person, but I'm doing my best to stay healthy and young, because I think that I do need to serve as a role model. And obviously, like you said, so far so good. I don't have any medical issues whatsoever, and I don't have a gray hair on my body yet. So that's so far okay for 51. But we'll see.
Well, just to kind of go to just to finish with the diet, with the food part, I find this interesting. So calorie restriction, because intermittent fasting is a very big buzzword now, and everyone's talking about it. But I've heard you in other places talk about calorie restriction. Now, is there really a difference between the calorie restriction and intermittent fasting? Like, if someone decides to maybe eat 3 meals a day, but eat half the portions that they normally would do, would that be okay?
They both seem to work for studies of lab animals. So I think that, let's define it. So calorie restriction was the older way of doing it, which is eat little bits during the day, but not a lot. So you never really get to go to a restaurant and have a normal meal, which I think is a sad way to live. So I didn't like that, and I never did that. I couldn't do it. But I can do the intermittent fasting, which is skip a couple of meals a day, have tea, assuage your hunger that way, and then have a decent meal. And in fact, you'll find you really enjoy dinner more than you ever have. But yeah, they both probably work. There was an old idea that having big swings in insulin and sugar in your body is bad for you. And it may or may not be true, but it's very clear that animals that gorge themselves for an hour a day, I'm talking about mice here, but are hungry the rest of the time, are very, very healthy and long-lived. And so this gorging doesn't seem to be an issue for them, and I suspect is the same for us. Now, if you eat fatty hamburgers every day, once a day, or just go crazy, I don't think that's going to be good either. So I mean, speaking of what else other people do or should do, what I do is my dinners are like a Mediterranean diet. I'll have a salad, a light dressing, maybe some fish for some protein, occasionally some chicken, but not often a big steak. And one of the reasons for avoiding large amounts of animal protein is that there's a longevity mechanism in our body that responds to lower amounts of amino acids, particularly those that are found in meat. And so that's an additional benefit. Besides getting the vitamins that you need and all the minerals and lower calories from plant-based food and plants themselves, you do get this benefit of low amino acids. And then there's another aspect of plants that's good, which is that plants make molecules that turn on the body's defenses against aging. The process, we call it, for want of a better term, xenohermesis. But I take full blame. I was one of the people that made up that name. But xenohermesis is the idea that when plants are under adversity and you eat them, you get the benefits as well. Adversity is an important point. I want to just make this now. The reason that being hungry and exercising and eating these plant molecules is good for you, we think, is that it puts the body in a state of perceived future trouble. So you're running away from a saber-toothed tiger. You're hungry because your food supply is running out. Your body fights back. Otherwise, it's very complacent. You sit around watching movies or looking at a computer screen all day. It's not going to put much effort into living longer and fighting disease. So you've really got to fight against what modern society has given us to get those ancient defenses to work.
Oh, right. Because I did see that in your book. You talk about the foods that do, that's kind of the best quality of food that you should be eating are the foods that have those stressors, right? Like you said, vegetables that are colored, peppers, yellow, green, or whatever, yellow, red, or green leafy vegetables. Is that because they have those stressors, or organic food because of the same reason?
It is. That's why. So I do look for colored foods and foods that haven't been grown in perfect conditions. So those white lettuces that are all watery, they're not full of these molecules. Whereas a lettuce that you might grow in your backyard or has been under the light, under UV sunlight, they might not look as good, but they will be better for you.
So what about romaine lettuce? I love romaine lettuce, but I love those chunky pieces. That's not good. That's basically a waste of nutrients. There's nothing in that basically, correct? Except water.
Right. Well, they're not as healthy as they could be, unfortunately, but it's still better than eating something bad for you. But that's why I think organic is so good, actually. Well, chocolate's not as bad as long as you can not overdo it and not have a ton of sugar. It's a lot of these xenohermetic molecules in chocolate.
So besides the diet stuff and, of course, exercising, one thing I wanted to ask you about exercising, can you stress your body too much to age? I've heard a lot from people, because I'm like a big exercise person, that also, if you do too much cardio, for example, that ages your body because of you're stressing it repetitively over and over again. Is there such a thing as doing, too much exercise for aging?
Well, I haven't seen any evidence of that. Repeating one motion too many times can lead to problems, but for joints. But in terms of aging, it's very hard to overdo exercise. People who cycle, I think it was more than 80 miles a week, reduced their chances of all causes of mortality by 40% compared to people who didn't exercise at all. And that's a lot of exercise per week. So I wouldn't worry about that unless you feel like your body can't take it, or you measure your blood and you've got a lot of cortisol or creatine kinase, which is a marker of muscle damage. Otherwise, I think you'd be fine.
You'd be fine. Just because, people like the wear and tear of someone's body over time. That's why a lot of people are like, oh, if you exercise 3 times a week, it could be actually more beneficial for long-term longevity versus just, constantly like pounding your body over and over again.
Well, yeah, I'm constantly pounding is never good. Though the number of knees that need replacing from running is not that many as you might think. No, the body has a remarkable ability to heal itself, and the idea that we're just like a machine that wears out is the wrong way to think about our bodies. We are self-repair machines, and if you've got good health, good diet, and you just, don't every day pound your body, but you give it some rest, then it can regenerate. And we're showing now in my lab that things that we thought were never reversible, such as blindness, are reversible. And so actually I'm very excited about finding ways to turn on the body's rejuvenation and repair processes, so that even if you do wear out a joint from, let's say, a professional sports player or something, that we do have something that can reset the age of your hip or your knee or your ankle or your wrist, and it'll rejuvenate, it'll come back. And the point is that just because it's worn out doesn't mean it can't ever get back to how it was.
That's incredible. Are you talking about stem cells or?
No, we have something that's really new. We figured out how to turn back the clock. And so the scratches on the DVD, we can polish those off and get the cell to read the information again, the genes, as though it's young again. And when we do that, the body just becomes young. It doesn't just act young, it literally is young. And we can measure that with a test. This is a test that we're optimizing in my lab. We want to democratize this, and probably by the end of this year, I'll have a company that will make this available to everybody, that we can test your biological age and accurately tell you whether you're on the right trajectory or you need to do better, and here's what you should do, or you're doing really well, and here's how you could do even better. And when you might ultimately die if you do these things or you don't do these things. We can do that now with just a mouth swab. And I'm excited about that, because if you don't know how you're doing internally and biologically, you really don't. First of all, you don't have a lot of psychological determination. It's very easy to just give up on things that are painful and stressful and difficult. But also, once you know where you are, you have a goal. You can say, okay, 6 months from now, I want to be 3 years younger than I am now. And so I've been doing that kind of thing with my body. And according to tests, I'm now younger than I was 10 years ago.
How old are you? How old are you according to that test? 12.
No.
Yeah.
I'm in my early 40s. So I'm now in my early 50s. So, but 10 years ago, I was actually in my 50s according to those tests, and I had to take radical steps to get back to my real age, and then eventually back to a younger age.
That's okay. So you're talking about it so blasé, like everyone does this in their home lab. So you basically created an entire way people could just take a mouth swab and see what their biological or the chronological age they are, and then basically give them ways to reverse it. That's customized per person for the person.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. So right as of today, is there any tests that people can even do this at, or no? Is there any way people can really do that?
Well, it's not customized, and there aren't recommendations for the scratch test. But there is one that I've been doing for over a decade. It is a blood test, and it's called Inside Tracker, and I consult for them, so I have to disclose that. I don't get paid for it, though. But in any case, Inside Tracker is what I've been using, and they give you an estimate of your inner age, as they call it. Yeah, and that's the one that I've been steadily getting younger for 10 years on. But the new test is a measure of your DNA and the chemicals that get added and subtracted to that over time. That's truly your biological clock, very accurate. And that's the test that we are going to be making available to everybody, at least in the US, and then hopefully globally. But then also use the knowledge that I've gained and a lot of artificial intelligence to tailor recommendations for individuals, sex, gender, demographic, genetics, lifestyle, wishes, as to what people could do. And then we'll actually see if it works. We certainly plan on doing some clinical trials to validate this. But also imagine having 1 million people take this test regularly. We will learn things very quickly, what makes our age go backwards or forwards.
That is incredible. So that will be done by the end of the year?
Yeah. So the technology is developed. We are at the we've got the patent. We're spinning this out as we speak, and we hope to have the product available, if not by the end of the year, by early next. I can't disclose the team that I've pulled together, but it's a really famous group that have built some of the biggest companies in the world.
Oh my gosh, I am so excited for that, because that's actual real data that someone can see in front of them, as opposed to these guessing, like I feel young, I must, but but that doesn't mean anything, right? In the grand scheme of things. I mean, that's incredible. So then companies like a 23andMe and all these other types of companies where people can read their stuff, what does that do in comparison to, I just wrote it down, Inside Tracker? What do you find out from using one of those companies? Well,
23andMe is similar in the sense that it reads the DNA, but it's totally different in the fact that your genes are given to you from your parents, and that's it. They don't change. Whereas this clock, which is measuring the chemical changes on the DNA, that's dynamic. That will change with your body weight, with how you eat. We can tell if you've been smoking at some point. And so the test is repeatable, this age test. And that's what's very different. And I think one of the reasons 23andMe has a business model that has taken off, but now is slowing down, as far as I know, is because people won't or don't need to retake the test. So I'm excited about this for a number of reasons, not just because it's a better business model. I don't do things for money, obviously. I don't, I've got a job at Harvard for life. I'm not worried about that. What I am worried about is not seeing the future arrive quick enough to be able to help people. And this will be a big one. This will be really my first big foray into the consumer market, to be able to help people achieve what I think myself and my family have been doing for the last 10 to 15 years.
Okay, but didn't you have a company years ago for how do you pronounce it? Resveratrol. Resveratrol?
Resveratrol.
Resveratrol, yeah, exactly. Didn't you have a company and then it got bought by when the GlaxoSmithKline and for like a gazillion dollars? I mean, this is not, you've had companies. I mean, you're super successful. I mean, like you have what, like 500 patents or something crazy, and you keep on finding the cure for this and the cure for that. So this is not your first foray into like the consumer world.
Well, so most of my work has been either to help researchers or develop drugs. And we've done dozens of clinical trials, and there are ones that are pretty advanced now. I probably helped start about 15 companies. The first 4 of them went public. So it's been a remarkable 15 years. But, I'm always looking to do better and to do new things. Technology is changing all the time. And so this new test is brand new technology. We just invented it last year. And so I'm super excited about bringing that to the world as well.
Wow. Okay. Well, let's go on about how we could reverse the signs of aging. Well, there's 2 things, right? It's reversing the signs of aging and it's also living longer. So we've covered exercise, diet. This test will be miraculous. Give us some other ways that we can do this.
Well, there are supplements that I take, and I say in full disclosure, I'm not a doctor, so I don't recommend anything, but I do believe in the science, and what the science says from my lab and others is that there are ways to take certain supplements that could lengthen lifespan. So in my book, I list it all out on page 304. So if we don't get to go through each one, people can check it out. But the main ones that we've worked on that I take every day, you mentioned resveratrol. I still take that since 2004, and I'm still alive. And it's been shown in now many clinical studies in humans and countless mouse studies that it protects against inflammation and cancer and Alzheimer's. So it's a good one. The other one that I take is an NAD booster. So NAD is a chemical that's in our body that is needed for chemical reactions. Without it, we're dead in 30 seconds. But we make less of it as we get older. And so NMN is a molecule, stands for nicotinamide mononucleotide. So I take that to raise my NAD levels to where they were when I was young. And the reason for that is that the enzymes that I study, called sirtuins, they work to turn on the body's defenses against aging. And as we get older, because there's not enough of this NAD fuel for them, they do less work. And so the idea, which has been worked out in mice but not proven in people yet, is that by raising those NAD levels, my body will fight aging like it did when I was young. And that includes diseases of aging. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm still alive, and the clinical trials are in progress. So I'm hoping to have some positive results to talk about probably by the end of the year.
Well, I'm glad you brought up NAD because I'm a big NR fan, right? So and NAD for this now, and you talk about basically NMN a lot. What is the difference between NMN and NR? And does this, which scientifically is better? Because I was kind of like, all the research I've done is saying that NR is way more effective because it gets into your system easier because of the smaller molecules.
All right. Well, I don't want to jump into a legal fight here. There are vested interests involved, though I don't sell any supplements. So you can trust me as a scientist. So the way it works is that NR.
Okay.
So NR is a molecule similar to vitamin B3, and the body turns it into NMN, and then NMN is turned into NAD, and NAD is the one you want. So they're very similar. They're just both precursors to NAD, and the body will convert both into NAD. I've done or helped supervise enough clinical trials that I know NMN will raise NAD levels 1.5 to 2-fold in the bloodstream of people without any negatives, so without any question. I haven't tested NR side by side, so I can't get into saying scientifically which one's better. But I can say NMN works both in the mouse studies that we've done and the human clinical trials for raising NAD. And this debate about which one's better because one raises NAD and the other one doesn't get into the body, well, I know that that's wrong because I've seen clinical trials for the past 2.5 years. What we need to have really is side-by-side studies of the two molecules, NR and NMN, given to mice and given to humans, and to look at the outcomes. Are there benefits? Until any of those are done, and they haven't been, I think it's premature to be claiming one's better than the other.
Oh, I had no idea that you were in a legal battle. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make it uncomfortable.
I'm not. It's just a highly litigious space. And there's a lot of vested interests in that area. I'm not selling anything, so I think I'm just going by the data. There are also some professors who are involved with selling supplements that have strong personalities. They're on social media if you ever want to check them out. But yeah,
who are they? I'm going to write them down.
Let's put it that way.
It's a hot topic. Well, because I live in LA, and NAD is like people get all the NAD drips, and what those are too. Those IV drips is like a really big thing, yeah. And I've been hearing about I hear about NAD all the time. I've been taking it for 2 years, longer maybe even, and I never even heard of NMN before, until a friends of mine were talking about you. And I was like, what's the difference? And it's like hard to even say NR, how I can't even pronounce that, and MNN. Like I didn't realize there's all these other like legalities around it. Do you think the IV works or no?
Well, I would love to see some publications. And you always need these placebo controls because it's very easy to feel better after something's given to you. So that's the scientist in me talking, that I don't know the answer. But I can tell you an anecdote if you want, a pretty funny one for what that's worth. So I went
it's worth
to
a lot.
Well, it's a story. It may make you chuckle. That's about it. But I went to a very famous person from Hollywood who I won't say the name of because I don't think they'd appreciate it, but someone who's been on TV for many, many years. As well as movies. And so I was at their place and they said, why don't you try this NAD injection from my doctor? So I talked to the doctor who was there at the house and went by the next morning. It was early. I was feeling pretty rotten, 7:30 in the morning. And I suffered for over a year of having a spasm, or I would say continual cramp in my piriformis muscle, which is one that goes through the hole in your hip bone. Because I wrote a book and I was sitting down for 2 years and I didn't exercise much and I could barely walk. I was limping and I'd been limping for a year with a lot of pain. And I went to get this injection and it was straight into the muscle nearby the piriformis. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think it would work. So here's the skeptic in me. I'll do it for the sake of my friend because they really want me to. And I felt tingly. I felt that there was something going on. I walked out. That afternoon, I was at the airport flying home, and I was almost skipping in the way I was walking, and I couldn't figure out what was different. And it took me a lot of thought as to realize that pain had gone away, and it stayed away. It's never come back. And that's despite me doing physiotherapy and exercise and massage to try and get rid of this pain, and it wouldn't go away. This one injection seemed to be the answer.
Really? And that was just an NAD injection?
Yeah, it was. But it's, all my professor colleagues, please don't judge me. I'm not saying that was a clinical trial, and I'm not even saying that's proof of anything. But it is curious.
That is. So do you get these NAD IVs then and all these other type of, like, how do you take, are you taking a supplement or how are you doing it now?
Yeah, I'm taking NMN capsules that are similar to the ones used in the clinical trial.
Wow. So can I ask you a question also? In your book, you also talk about it. And one of my doctors once wrote a prescription for metformin. And you talk about it, metformin also. Like, what does metformin do, and why should people take it? And do you still take it?
I take it maybe a few days a week. I really think it's got a good chance of being a longevity drug. There are studies of tens of thousands of people who have taken metformin for their type 2 diabetes, for their high blood sugar. And those people actually are, on average, longer lived than people who don't even take the drug and don't have type 2 diabetes. Right. So that's stunning. The other thing is you can look at their cancer rates, heart disease, Alzheimer's, and frailty, and those go down as well in the high-risk groups. So I'm pretty convinced that metformin's going to be helpful beyond type 2 diabetes. So I take it a couple of times, maybe a few times a week with food. Now, the reason I don't take it more times is twofold. One is I'm very sensitive to it. My stomach feels sick when I take it. That's why I have to have it with food. The other reason is that it seems to reduce your ability to lift weights and build up muscle. And I'm in the process of trying to get my body back into shape.
Really?
So exercising on days that I don't take metformin.
Why is that, I wonder? Why would that happen?
Well, the simplest explanation I can give is that metformin interferes with your mitochondria's ability to make energy, and that chemical is called ATP. So if you're not making as much chemical energy, you're going to feel more tired. So you might do, let's say I'm doing arm curls. I'll do, instead of 100, I'll do 80. That would be the issue. And then
really,
and then you don't get the benefits. Yeah.
So why would that be the case? So I've got a bunch of questions just on that. So why don't people know about this? Like the doctor who prescribed it to me is like a longevity doctor or whatever. And I didn't know anything about it really. So I kind of just took myself off of it. Like I took it for a couple of weeks. I'm like, screw this. I don't even know what this is. And then I saw it in your book, and people, like a lot of my friends who are super well educated on this stuff are taking it. Why is not more people talking about some of these things? And why are not more people taking that?
Well, most doctors are reticent to prescribe a medicine if you don't get a disease, haven't had the disease yet. And so there's a relatively arbitrary line that says this is type 2 diabetes. Above that, HbA1c, you've got the disease. But if you're below it,
right,
you don't have a disease, which I find a crazy way to practice medicine. I assume that it's mostly based on cost and reimbursement, that you can't just hand out medicines. But on the other hand, metformin is very cheap. It costs a few cents a day. It's available in other countries over the counter to anybody.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, it's just mostly it's the Western world that regards it as a drug. And but yeah, it's a very safe one. It's one of the world's safest medicines. It's on the list of the World Health Organization's essential medicines for humanity. But to your question, most doctors won't give you a drug unless you have a disease that the drug is designed for.
And so, but if it's going to help with longevity, what is the correlation? Then you can't really do weights, or you can't really work out on it. You can't really do resistance training on it. It's kind of like it's kind of like an oxymoron, right? Like, so what are people supposed to do? Is it just on the days that you take it, you can't do it? I mean,
yeah, you can do anything. It's not a big deal. You maybe it's only a small change, 5% in your muscle size. But in that study, those muscles were just as strong, and there was less inflammation in the muscle. So unfortunately, what happens, and I see this every day as a scientist, out comes a study, nobody reads it, nobody even bothers looking at the graphs. Someone in Reuters or AP puts out a press release, or the university does, and it becomes dogma. And there's almost no way to reverse that. And I'm doing podcasts occasionally, but that's not reaching the hundreds of millions of people that you'd need to reach to be able to turn this around. My book is helping, I think. I'm getting a lot of good feedback about that. But it's still hard to reach most people who don't read still. So ultimately, it's really up to the media to correctly interpret science. But that takes a lot of work, and they have to put out stories every day. And they don't have the time like I do to actually read a paper before writing about it.
But you're doing such great things and such cool things. I mean, so if we can kind of just bounce back and forth here to the reversal of aging. So does metformin help with age? It may help you live longer, but does it help reverse the aging? Does that do?
Yeah, that's an unknown. There's a study where just a short course, I think it was a week of metformin, maybe even less, a few days, reversed the clock. But that's, to me, that's a bit hard to believe. I'd like to see that reproduced. There was another study that was done that was super interesting. Was it Greg Fahey was a professor and Steve Horvath at UCLA? They gave a cocktail to people, and it was metformin, is it growth hormone, and DHEA, and they got an age reversal of 2.5 years on average. Now, these aren't big changes. So I don't think metformin's going to turn the clock back 50%, something like that. I think you need this technology that I was describing where we really can reset the clock.
Yeah.
Not just dial it back a little bit.
Is the test that you're talking about, or is it maybe a different test where people can actually go and test their genes to see what they're even susceptible to? Like if I'm susceptible to Alzheimer's or diabetes, or, and maybe you're susceptible to, something, whatever other, major diseases. And then we can kind of work towards tweaking that.
Well, there are two aspects to your genetics. There's one that's the 23andMe genome, which does give you predictions about your future health. But it's actually, it needs to be combined with the other measurements that we do, which are the chemicals that get added and subtracted physically to the DNA that tell a certain gene to be switched on and off. And because it doesn't matter if you've got a mutant gene if it's always switched off. If it comes on later in life, you could be in trouble. Or vice versa, you could have a mutation that makes a gene get switched off as you get older that you need for health. And the only way to know if it's getting switched off is to measure it. And that's where I come in.
Yeah. And just until your incredible system happens. So what can people do? So if we are living this long, what's the quality of life that what age are you trying to get people to live until? And is it going to be in our generation? Are we going to be able to live this long? Or is it going to be, in 50 years from now? And what's the quality of life that we would have?
Well, for people that are already monitoring their biometrics with rings and with watches, combine that with the blood test, perhaps. Yeah, we both got that. We're already in that future. It's a small number of us right now who care enough about their health and longevity that we go to those efforts. But for the mainstream people who don't read the book and don't listen to this podcast, those people are probably 10 years behind before their doctors would be talking to them about their aging process, measuring it, and doing something about it. In between now and then, I hope that companies like mine will bring it to the masses, democratize it, spread the word that knowing your age is important, and B, there is something you can do about it.
But how old, like how much more life extension can we get?
Yeah, fair enough. So I try to avoid that question because it's how long is a piece of string. I don't think there'll be ever a day where I say, okay, I've done my job. We're living long enough. Let's stop. I don't think that's ever going to happen with humanity. We've cured enough cancers. Let's stop. So it'll be continuous. I think within our lifetime, it's possible to do all the right things and increase your chances to make it past 100 in good health. I think that's doable. Maximum lifespan is 122 that we know of. It's pretty hard to break through that right now. But I wouldn't be shocked if millions of people start doing what I'm saying and have access to drugs that enhance their genetics that they got from their parents, I don't see why that record couldn't be broken. But more importantly, what's the average lifespan? That's really what matters. There'll always be those outliers. And so the average lifespan in the US actually is a bit less than it used to be, thanks to COVID, unfortunately. But it's hovering around the late 70s, early 80s for most Western countries with good healthcare. But that's going up every year, pandemic notwithstanding. But so within our lifetime, we're going to get to an average lifespan of probably 85, 90 if things just continue to putter along. If age reversal becomes true, the way I see it, certainly children who are alive today will see people turning their clock back and living on average, I think, to 100. Now, how long can people eventually live? I'm on record saying that we might make it to 150. And I still think that there's no reason why we couldn't do that. It's just a question of resources and the will to make it happen, because the science, I think, is already panning out.
How long will we have a quality of life where we can be doing the things that we're doing now at like 44 or 51 or, right? Like what kind of quality? If we're like 95 or 106 and we're stuck in a wheelchair in an old folks home, not so great.
The first thing to know is that the only reason that my technologies and my colleagues' technologies work is because we're keeping people healthy and disease-free. And it turns out if you're not sick, you don't die. And so that's the important distinction between medicines of today and medicines that we're developing for the future, that medicine of today will treat one disease but not affect the others. So you end up with, to give a concrete example, much less heart disease, but the brain still ages, so you get an increase in the number of people who have dementia, which is not a good situation, of course. Our approach will keep all parts of the body alive and healthy for longer. That's the goal. And that way, we will have extended youth rather than extended old age. And what we find in the lab when we extend the lifespan of mice is that when they live longer, they stay healthy, of course, because they go hand in hand, but then they die quickly, sometimes just overnight. And that's true for humans. People that live over 100 have require much less healthcare, less costly, and die more rapidly. And that, we'll all die. There's no question about that. But will it be a quick and efficient, economically efficient death? Well, I hope that that's true for everybody one day. It's what ends up being painful and expensive and traumatic for families are these long chronic diseases that I'm really trying to avoid here.
Wow. So then this is fascinating to me. I'm sure you hear this all the time, but so what else can we do to help reverse the aging? We talked about the exercise, Metaformin, all these NAD, increasing your NAD. Is there anything else? I mean, you're wearing this. Is that an Oura ring that you have on your hand?
It is an Oura ring. Yeah. So so getting feedback is important. There's two reasons. One is individually we feel empowered and we have a better sense of what's working and what's not. So by measuring my sleep with this ring on my finger here, I've been able to optimize my sleep. I get much better sleep now.
I have the same one. That's why I noticed it.
And I would have really not a good idea why I wasn't sleeping. So there's the ring. There's other things that are good. A lot of people have access to these wristbands and watches that measure heart rate. I find that less effective, but it's still good to know if you're exercising. And your resting heart rate is actually a good measure of your youth and fitness. So my resting heart rate is around high 40s, low 50s, which is equivalent to someone who runs a lot. And I don't do a lot of running. So I'm happy with that number and I'm trying to keep it low. So that's also useful information. Where the future is going is super exciting. I have a section in my book about this. And this is going way faster than just about anybody realizes. The ability to seriously monitor your internal workings. So there are companies that have patches that stick to your skin for a few weeks. Those provide terabytes of data to doctors, to hospitals, and patients are now being sent home with them much earlier. So the hospitals are saving thousands of dollars and the patient gets much better care. But ultimately, we're all going to be wearing one of these and your doctor gets an alert. If there's a problem, they'll send an ambulance if you have a pending heart attack. and it'll sense how you sleep, how you walk, even how you talk, detecting depression. That's the future. And the idea of going to your doctor once a year for an annual checkup and doing coughing and having them listen to your heart or to your lungs, that's going to seem so medieval just in a few years from now.
Okay. Again, you just blew my mind. So you're just saying, again, you're saying it so matter-of-factly, like blasé. Oh yeah, and by the way, you're going to be, is this another one of your patents?
Unfortunately, no. But I'm talking with, I'm talking with a company that's developing these cutting-edge devices. I'm going to be trying one myself soon. And that, I think, in a few years will be a multi-billion-dollar company.
So basically, let me get this straight. You wear a patch. So this is the future. You're going to be wearing a patch, and all the data, it will kind of take all the data. That data your doctor can have. So if there's ever anything that in the data that seems to be kind of off, they get an alert. Is that basically what you said?
Yeah.
And then they can tweak your health protocol.
Oh yeah. That is going to happen in the next 10 years. There's no question. There's already hospitals are clamoring to get these devices because it saves them so much money. But ultimately, this device will be sold to the consumer. It'll cost a few dollars. Stick it on there, and you'll be monitored by artificial intelligence that'll see problems before even you or your doctor would have ever guessed. And
you say that this will also be available within 10 years.
Well, it's available to me today and patients that go home from hospitals. But to the average person, I think less than 10 years, for sure.
So how can I get on this? Like, can I be a part of a case study? Can I try this thing out?
Well, I can't guarantee that, but we can talk. But there are companies, for example, there's one called BioIntelliSense, which you could look up.
These are the companies. Notes. Okay.
Yeah, so BioIntelliSense is a group of people. IntelliSense. These are the people that help build the inner workings of the Apple Watch, and now they're doing this.
Wow. Well, you can tell if you talk to them, the inner workings of this Apple Watch is not very accurate. I mean, it tells me I'm burning a bazillion calories when I'm sitting here on my butt, and when I'm actually moving, it says I'm doing nothing. So you can tell those people they have to maybe tweak this watch a little bit. But
right, I will.
You will. You'll let them know, because this is incredible information, because I can barely even find a doctor now. It's even hard to find an internist. So is it going to be a very specific type of doctor that's going to have, and how would the doctor have time to be able to get notifications from all of his patients? Is there going to be a system that they can do that as well? Like on a timely manner?
Right. So there will be, you'll have a doctor for different reasons. It won't just be one doctor. There will be armies of doctors who are manning the stations, probably nurses as well, who are on the lookout for emergencies and taking care of you at a distance, of course. They don't even have to be anywhere in your country, but probably will be. But for that, so don't think of it as one person takes care of you. Think of hundreds of computers and potentially dozens of people who specialize in different parts of your body, getting alerts and taking care of you. And for most people, there won't be an alert. But as you get older, if you fall over, if your heart's starting to fail, or even if you just had a heart attack, there will probably automatically be an ambulance sent to your house.
So, just on you for a second, how did you become so just interested and fascinated with longevity and age reversal? Were you just always a brain, like a human brain, wandering around as a teenager? How did you, who are you, David? How did this happen?
I'm not sure. I do have a large head, but I don't think my brain is any better than anyone else's. I am very curious. I do think humanity can do a lot better than it is. I think the future is bright. I'd like to see that future in my lifetime. And I decided to make the future come true, kind of like Elon Musk, but for biology, I guess, that kind of mentality. But yeah, the secret is just find something that you love doing. So what I do during the day with my lab and the companies, there's a dozen or so companies that I'm helping run and I've co-founded. this is fun for me. And when you're doing something that's fun, it doesn't take a lot of brain power, I find. But longevity
well, how
specifically,
often are you
I've
in
been
your
interested
lab?
Forever. Well, pre-COVID, I was in my lab 4 or 5 days a week. I used to give a lot of talks and travel for those, so that was a bit of a burden. But I'm in touch with my lab constantly through texting and email. I go into the lab now, at most once every 2 weeks because of the pandemic. But it seems to work just fine remotely. In fact, if I'm not there, they seem to be able to work more efficiently.
Well, how big is your team?
It fluctuates between 15 and 20 people. There are PhD students and postdocs, so people have got their PhD and come back for training. But it's an elite group. I get requests every day for people to join from around the world, and maybe select a few each year. So these are people who are way smarter than me doing this work. And if I have a skill, it's in picking good people and motivating them to do what most people would think would be impossible. And just being supportive. The reason that I'm fascinated with longevity, I think, is because my grandmother, when I was 4 years of age, said everything around you is going to die. She said, I'm going to die, your parents are going to die, your cat's going to die. I shortly thereafter realized I was going to die too. The whole thing is tragic, that we're a conscious species. We know that we're going to die. I think that's a pretty cruel setup. And so that didn't leave me. I think most kids try to forget about it because it's quite a horrible thought to dwell on. But it wasn't until I got to college that I thought I should really devote my life to this, because I could see that the world needed to address this problem, that it was only going to become more acute as the world on average got older and older. And that world has now arrived.
Yeah. But you're doing amazing things to change it. I feel like, not to keep on jumping, is there anything else that we forgot to talk about in terms of how we can reverse aging? We're talking about sleep tracking. Do you think sleep tracking is important, or just overall just having enough sleep is what we need to do, and the importance of sleep? We're kind of talking about that a little bit, and we kind of got shifted a little bit again. Do you find it's necessary to even wear these trackers, or are they even becoming, there's been a ton of research talking about how everyone's tracking everything to such a large degree that it's giving us more anxiety because we're curious. We're like, we're not sleeping enough. We're not doing this well. We're not, everything is about optimizing health, that maybe our health is being less optimized.
Well, I'm a scientist, so I like data. Otherwise, you're driving a car without a dashboard, and who wants to do that? So I'm a big fan of these devices. I don't find them stressful. I find them empowering. And I get stressed when I don't get enough sleep, and I look at my phone and it says, I was a bad boy last night. Usually it's alcohol that's to blame. And so I'm learning how to be good, how to make my body function optimally. I think in the case of some things like measuring blood sugar levels, which I did for a few weeks, you don't need to wear that constantly. If you're healthy, you can learn what foods work for you, what ones don't, and it's different for each person. So you learn that. So now I don't need to wear one. In fact, it's just distracting having the ability to look at your blood sugar. You become a bit addicted to it. At least I did. I've got laser focus disease for sure. But things like the ring, I just find it helpful to keep remembering that I have a body that needs help and is functioning. Otherwise, it's very easy to go through the day without thinking about your health, and certainly your future health. You just want to put off because it can be stressful to think about. But ultimately, information is power. And there will be a time when we just can't imagine living without that kind of information.
No, I agree. I actually like this ring a lot. It makes it very easy to kind of navigate the data. But, but some people are like, oh, it's too much work to do this and do that. Like, life is stressful enough. And now they're checking 77 different, types of, wearables, so to speak. And then I have one other question for you, and then I can wrap this up for you. And like I said, I don't remember what that question was because, oh yeah, I was going to ask you about aspirin. Is it beneficial to take in terms of longevity? You mentioned that also in your book, Lifespan, by the way, a very good book. I recommend it to everybody. Tons of information.
Oh, thanks. I take a baby aspirin every day. There's an overwhelming majority of positive data that aspirin is helpful, not just for cardiac issues in the future, but also prevention of certain cancers such as colon cancer. And the media tends to give equal weighting to the positives and negatives of science, but when you actually read the literature, you find that it can be 99 versus 1, positive versus negative. And that's the case for aspirin in my view. So I continue to take that every day. I think in general, it's good to try and dampen inflammation in the body. And so until I see a study that I believe that it's dangerous to take, I'm going to continue taking it.
So can you just run us through a day in the life of you? What time do you wake up in the morning? What's your first meal? Like, tell us play by play what you do. And I'm going to emulate it as best I can. I'm just curious. You've given us some good stuff,
okay.
But.
All right. Well,
what time do you wake up?
Not every day is perfect. Put it that way. So I would wake up between 6:30 and 7:30. I do emails for about half an hour while in bed. Texts. I get up. I will obviously I'll shower and all that stuff, but then I'll start my meetings usually around 8. These are Zoom meetings. I don't have breakfast. I will have a cup of tea or a coffee. I typically also have time to go up and get a spoonful of yogurt with dissolved resveratrol in it. I just mix it up. That or olive oil. I'm trying olive oil these days. So I've had a tiny bit of food, not a lot. And I'll just go through. It's pretty busy. As you know, when I joined you today, I'm going from meeting to meeting. I'm already late for my next meeting. So I pack it in.
I know, I'm sorry.
And so how much detail do you want? So what I'll be on a meeting for?
So much. I want a lot of detail.
Well,
I want like as much as you can remember.
Goodness. Well, it doesn't all contribute to longevity, I don't think, but there's a fair amount of stress.
I don't care.
Checking in on how the companies are doing, new results in the lab, hiring new CEOs, dealing with.
Oh, don't do that. I can't hear you when you touch that.
Oh,
yeah.
So a typical day would be dealing with issues in the lab, companies, hiring people, firing people, new results, designing clinical trials, hearing clinical trial results, giving a number of talks.
You put all of. Hold on a second. So in the morning, you have a scoop of yogurt with either olive oil in it or I can never pronounce it. Resveratrol. I can never pronounce that word. Say it, please.
Resveratrol.
Resveratrol. Yes. Okay. You put a scoop. You put a teaspoon of either one of it.
Right. Well, I'll start with either yogurt or olive oil and mix resveratrol powder, a gram of that in there. Mix that around and swallow it. And I've been doing that for over 10 years now. And there was a human trial just now that showed that resveratrol was quite effective in preventing metabolic disorders. So there's that. I will skip breakfast. I'll skip lunch. It's just a lot of meetings. And then I'll try to go to the gym, or I have weights just behind my chair here that I'll lift. I try to do 100 push-ups every day and sit-ups. And then at dinner, I'll either go out for dinner and have a light meal. It could be a salad with some fish maybe. Or at home, same thing. But what I'll typically do is have a dinner that's half the size of what you would expect for somebody my size. And then, I do have a glass of red wine occasionally too. So that contributes to the calories.
But you're not eating breakfast except that teaspoon of yogurt with olive oil. You're not having lunch, so you're really only having a meal. But you take that meal and you cut it basically in half a portion, and then you'll have so you're not having very many calories a day. How many calories are you eating a day?
I don't know. Probably 500 to 1,000. I would, but I've been losing weight. I mean, you're really asking me personal stuff, but I've been shedding pounds. I'm down to the weight that I was when I was in my late teens now. There's barely any fat on my body. So I'll probably have to start eating a bit more to maintain that, because I've gotten about to the right weight at this point. But yeah, it's been...
wow. And that was on purpose, right? You did that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. I wanted to see my abs again so that I can say hi to my abs finally after a number of decades.
I like that. And then on the weekends, do you do the same? Is it the same 7 days a week, or do you take a break and let yourself go on the weekend? Or
yeah, I might eat brunch with friends on a Sunday, go out to dinner for sure, and eat a relatively healthy meal at a restaurant. I gave up desserts at 40. I don't regret that. But I steal desserts, so
right.
That doesn't.
I saw that in here.
That's still true. I did eat a slice of cheesecake the other day, so that's occasionally I give in. I mean, a cheesecake once in a while doesn't hurt anybody. And I was actually telling a new friend that I ate a piece of cheesecake, and she said, "Oh, thank God you're normal," because she was worried that I was so strict about it. But that's the thing; you don't have to be that strict, I don't think, for this all to work. And in fact, if you're too strict, you can't keep it up.
No, exactly. And how long's each workout? You work out every day, or you work out like 4 times a week, or you said you work out every day in the middle of the day?
Probably.
How long?
Every other day, I do some form of exercise, whether it's weights or cardio or both. Mostly, I'm doing weightlifting in the gym or here in my bedroom. Try to give my big muscles a workout, so my legs and back. Hip hinge exercises are good for people who sit down all day, like myself. Otherwise, you end up with this problem that I mentioned. I run on a treadmill for only 10 or 15 minutes. I really don't like feeling hypoxia. It's very uncomfortable for me. I don't enjoy running, but I do it a couple of times a week, maybe 3 times a week, because it's good for me. I go for walks. I try to walk a couple of times a week for at least an hour outside. And then in summer, I do a lot of kayaking and water sports. So I'm looking forward to that too.
And then one other question I have, and then you can go. Your brother, you put your brother on the same regimen. You said he was like, the aging brother, and like you were the one that was kind of like, you were like becoming Benjamin Button, basically. You know who Benjamin Button is? The guy who ages in reverse and he becomes a baby. Yeah. Well, I wanted never to be presumptuous. Since your brother now is doing the same regimen as you and your father, does he have gray hair still, or did he lose the gray hair, or where is he at in that whole thing?
He's still gray. It hasn't been reversed. So it's hard to say where he's at. I do feel bad saying that about my brother. I'm very close to him. And just to say he was the negative control.
Why? You said nothing bad. I thought it was funny.
Well, I would say that he looks like his age. He's 47. So, that's not a criticism, right? That's just what it is. That's just what people look like at that age. But hopefully, I can help him too, that this will help slow things down. What I think is happening is with my father, who's been doing this now for over a decade and literally has no issues medically, feels great. He's actually losing friends at a high rate, and he still feels like he's 30. So it's tough on him. He still hangs out with my ex-girlfriend.
Amazing.
Which is funny to think about.
He does?
Well, it's platonic as far as I know.
That's funny.
But they're good friends. And so he's had to hang out with people who are much younger than him because, especially men of his age, early 80s, that they usually have multiple diseases and they're not very physically fit. And you know, he goes on walks and he's at the gym a number of times a week. So yeah, we're pretty proud of my dad. I don't know if what I haven't prescribed anything. He's been reading my research. He decides for himself that he's going to do this. But I don't know if my research has helped him, but I do hold him up as a beacon of hope that we can all aspire to be like that in our 80s.
Absolutely. That's incredible. Well, I'll let you go. I know that you're late for your other meeting, and I don't want to keep you any longer than necessary. Although I can go on and on. But for those of you who don't know, the book is called Lifespan, and it is really a great read. It's Why We Age and Why We Don't Have to by David Sinclair. And his credentials are enough to make you pick up the book. MIT, Harvard. You're just a walking brain, is what I said. But it's been really, really nice speaking with you. And I appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast.
Well, thank you. This has been really great. Thank you for having me on today.
Habits and hustle, time to get it rolling. Stay up on the grind, don't stop, keep it going. Habits and hustle, from nothing into something. All Out, hosted by Jennifer Cohen. Visionaries, tune in, you can get to know them. Be inspired, this is your moment. Excuses, we ain't having that. The Habits and Hustle podcast, powered by Habit